Hello everyone, welcome back to NDLWRKshop. I'm Julie, and today I'm excited to introduce our latest kid size pattern, the simple tunic. We've received countless requests for this pattern over the years, so we thought it was finally time to bring it to life. We absolutely love creating patterns for our younger cosplay enthusiasts, so if you'd like to see more kids patterns, maybe even a Princess Zelda design, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your ideas. This pattern comes in an array of kids sizes from 2 all the way up to 16. Print it easily at home on US letter or A4 paper, or go big with A0 at your local print shop. As always, our patterns come with detailed written tutorials packed with helpful information. You'll find a measurement guide, a pattern printing guide with various options, material suggestions, and plenty of pictures and graphics to assist you throughout the process. We highly recommend making a mock-up before you begin. No two bodies are the same, so making a mock-up allows you to tweak and adjust the pattern to make sure the fit is right for you. For this particular pattern, height is the most important factor when selecting the right size. Unlike adult sizing, where measurements like chest, waist, and hips change significantly, kids' measurements don't vary as much in those areas. However, height increases more noticeably as kids grow, which is why we recommend prioritizing the height measurement when choosing a size. Please note that the seam allowance for this pattern is 1 centimeter unless otherwise specified. Now, without further ado, let's dive into the tutorial.
Begin by overlocking the following areas: the rounded edges of the 4 pocket pieces, the side seams, bottoms, and shoulders of both the front and back bodice pieces, and the entire perimeter of the sleeve pieces. Take out your placket piece and iron the long edge with no notch towards the inside by 1 centimeter. Take out your front bodice pattern and lay it over the front fabric piece. On the right side of the fabric, carefully trace the center front cutting line. Ensure the bottom of this line is distinctively marked. Precision is crucial here. When cutting, stop precisely at the marked bottom. It's important not to cut shorter or longer. Remember, accuracy is essential. Now that your center front tunic is cut, open it up in a very wide V. Right side to right side, pin the notch of the placket to the tunic at the base of the opening. With the placket face down on the machine and the tunic facing up towards you, sew the pieces together starting from the top edge all the way to the other top edge about 2 to 3 millimeters from the edge. Take your time when nearing the placket notch as to not avoid any unwanted pleats. Just a quick tip here, when you get to the base of the opening on the tunic, place your needle down into the fabric, lift the foot, and move your tunic fabric behind the foot. This will help to avoid a pleat being made in this area. If done properly, here is what it should look like so far. Iron the seam allowance towards the inside of the placket. Fold the placket in half so that the ironed edge lays over the seam allowance and iron it down. you can pin the folded edge down, with the sewn side of the placket facing up, top stitch 3 mm from the seam on the placket. Iron everything down nicely. The right side of the placket should be ironed towards the inside of the tunic, and the left side of the placket should be ironed and facing away from the tunic. Place your center front opening so it lays flat and natural. Make a diagonal tack at the base of the placket. Moving on to the pockets. Take out your front and back skirt pieces as well as all 4 pocket pieces. Right side to right side, line up the pockets to the side seams of the skirt pieces. Make sure they are lined up at the very top edge of the skirt pieces. Pin and sew together 1 cm from the edge. Overlock the seam allowances together. Flip the pockets out. Iron and then top stitch 3 mm from the seam on the pockets. Overlock the top of the skirts, including the top of the pockets. Grab your bodice pieces and place your front bodice with your front skirt and your back bodice with your back skirt. The back is indicated with a double notch. Right side to right side, line up the bottom of the bodice to the top of the skirt, making sure to pin them together at the center notch. To line up the sides, you'll want to make sure the edge of your bodice pieces line up perfectly with the edge of your skirt pieces. You'll have to look on both sides to make sure they line up when pinning together. Sew together 1 cm from the edge. You'll now be preparing the belt loops. Start by ironing the belt loop piece in by 1 cm along both its longest lengths. Iron the piece in half so both folded edges line up perfectly. top stitch 2 millimeters from the edge on both sides. Using your pattern or a ruler, cut 8 equal length belt loops. They should all measure about 8 centimeters. Iron both ends of all your belt loops in by 1 centimeter. Using the bodice pattern, mark the location of all 8 belt loops with an erasable chalk or pen on your front and back pieces. Making sure all your belt loops have their 1 centimeter ends ironed in, pin them on your marked locations. Top stitch them down about 2 to 3 millimeters from the edge at the top and bottom. Once all 8 belt loops have been top stitched on, line up your front and back at the shoulders. Sew together 1 centimeter from the edge and iron your seam allowances open. Overlock the armholes. Moving on to the collar. Line up your top and bottom collar pieces. Pin together at the notch at the top. Sew only the top 1 centimeter from the edge, making sure to pull the under collar so it lines up perfectly at both ends of the collar. The under collar is slightly smaller than the top collar. This is to pull the seam inwards so it isn't visible from the outside. This is just a little designer touch. Iron the seam allowance towards the bottom collar. Just to be clear here, the bottom collar is the interfaced one. Do a top stitch 3 millimeters from the seam on the bottom collar. Line up the sides of the collar now. Make sure again you are pulling the bottom collar so it lines up with the edge of the top collar. Sew 1 centimeter from the edge on both sides. Cut off the excess seam allowance at the corners. Turn your collar inside out, making sure to push the corners out as best as possible. Stitch the bottom shut 7 millimeters from the edge. Before sewing the next step, you'll need to situate your collar stands to make sure the proper one is being sewn to your neckline. You'll notice the collar stands have a straight and round edge. The round edge needs to line up with the placket that was ironed away from the bodice. This is the left side. Place your stand so it looks like ours, then grab your collar and place it bottom collar down onto the stand. Keep everything in place. I suggest you pause the video here and really make sure everything is set up properly, and even feel free to watch this section again. With everything still in place, just like we set it up, grab your collar and collar stand and pin them together. There is a notch on the collar stand, and that is where you line up the edge of the collar. As for the other end, pin the collar to the collar stand 1 centimeter away from the edge, since this is your seam allowance and it will need to be free when sewing the stand to the neckline. Pin at the center notch and then finally sew together 9 millimeters away from the edge. Grab your tunic and place the collar stand right side to the neckline of the tunic. Place the collar stand 1 centimeter over the edge of the placket and start pinning all around from there. The notch on the collar stand should line up with the placket seam. Make sure to match the collar stand notches to the shoulder seams. Once you get to the other end, make sure the placket on this side, which is the right-hand side, is still being folded towards the bodice. The straight end of the collar stand should also go past the bodice edge by 1 centimeter. Once everything is properly pinned, sew together 1 centimeter from the edge. Grab your other collar stand and iron the bottom in by 1 centimeter. Flip your collar back down and grab your other collar stand and right side to right side, line it up with the collar stand sewn to the bodice. Pin together at the top edge from one end to the other end. Sew 1 centimeter from the edge. You'll want to start your stitch at the rounded side at the bottom where you did the 1 centimeter overlap. Sew all the way to the other end of the collar stand and then down the 1 centimeter overlap, making sure not to catch the placket. Trim some of the excess seam allowance at the corner and rounded edge. There's a lot of seam allowances here, so you can also trim off some excess from the seam allowance that's in between the collar stands. Place your collar nicely and iron the neckline seam allowance towards the inside of the collar. The collar stand with the bottom ironed in by 1 centimeter should be placed over and hide the neckline seam allowance. Pin it in place, and we suggest you close this part with a hand stitch. You can do a stitch in the ditch from the outside, but you might not catch the ironed in fold, so this is why we suggest a hand stitch. Now that your collar is complete, you're almost done. Take your sleeves out and iron in the hem by 1 centimeter. Top stitch the hem down 8 millimeters from the edge. Right side to right side, pin the sleeves to the armholes. The single notch on the sleeve lines up with the single notch on the tunic, and this indicates the front. The double notch on the sleeve lines up with the double notch on the tunic, and this indicates the back. The top middle notch on the sleeve lines up with the shoulder seam. Take your time while pinning, and when you're ready, sew together 1 centimeter from the edge. Right side to right side, line up the side seams of the front and back tunic. Pin together all the way from the hem of the sleeves, around the pocket bags, and down to the hem of the tunic. When pinning the top of the pockets, make sure the skirt seams of the front line up perfectly. Sew together 1 centimeter from the edge. Iron the seam allowances above and below the pockets open. Iron the pockets towards the front of the tunic. With the tunic laying flat on your table, place the pockets where they naturally fall along the waist seam allowance. Pin them in place and do a small tack in the seam allowance to keep them in place. Finish the hem of your tunic. You have two options here. Number 1, turn and iron the hem inwards twice by 1 centimeter and top stitch in place. Or number 2, overlock the entire hem, turn and iron inwards by 1 centimeter and top stitch in place. The final step is to add your snap at the top of the placket. And with that, your tunic is complete.
I think that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like and subscribe. Your support means a lot to the channel. And if you'd like to see more kid-sized patterns, please drop your ideas in the comments. Don't forget to follow us on all our social media platforms and feel free to tag us in your projects. We love seeing and sharing your creations. I hope you found this helpful, and as always, good luck with your projects, guys. Goodbye!